name is Janice Thomas, and I want to welcome you to Brookdale Community College. If this is your first time, welcome back to Brookdale, if this is a repeat visit. And I have a laundry list of thank yous to do, so I have my cheat sheet here to make sure that I don't miss anyone. I am director of the International Education Center, and our center does a lot of things. We work with international students, we work with education abroad programs, we work with our faculty to integrate global perspectives into the curriculum, and of course we work with our partners to sponsor and co-sponsor events on campus that have global or international or cross-cultural themes. And so this is part of what we do, this event here tonight. At Brookdale, as an education institution, we feel that it is our responsibility to provide opportunities to educate one another and to learn from one another so that we can help to dismiss stereotypes and dispel and demystify this othering that is happening in our community. So a group of us decided that one way that we could do this would be to present a panel where we get to learn about different faith traditions. And I called on my good friend Joe Ritacco because I said, well, I don't know how to put something like this together. And Joe has a lot of experience in this area and has done this kind of programming before. And so I'm so delighted to be working with Joe again. So with that, without further ado, let me just tell you a little bit about Joe, who will then introduce our panelists. And he'll tell you a little bit about the two organizations that he's involved with. So if you are familiar with Brookdale or you are a part of Brookdale, you may see Joe around campus. He attends classes here through some of our lifelong learning classes and continuing and professional studies, as well as academic classes here. He's an interfaith peace builder. He is on the board of the Monmouth Center for World Religions and Ethical Thought. He's also on the steering committee for the newly created New Jersey Interfaith Coalition. His exposure to diversity started at a young age with his attendance in Brooklyn public schools. He's had a long career at AT&T Bell Labs, which gave him the opportunity to be active in promoting affirmative action when he was with AT&T. And his longtime exposure to Islam actually started when he had a work assignment in Iran. And he views his lifelong exposure to diversity as a blessing that he chooses to share with everyone. And certainly, he's been a great friend to Brookdale, a great friend to the International Center and Change and Diversity Council. And without Joe, I know that we would not have been able to put on this great panel. So we look forward to all of our panelists and what you all have to contribute. We thank you for coming to Brookdale. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to our moderator.
Thank you, Janice. So before I forget, everybody turn off your techie gizmos, whatever they might be. And can you hear me okay? Before I introduce our panel, I'll give you very little background on the Golden Rule. The term itself originated in the 17th century in Europe. It was also known as the Golden Law or the ethic of reciprocity. That didn't stick. I have a hard time saying it. That's why. But a key point to emphasize, and it actually touches on the first question that's been handed in, is there are many variants of this guideline in many different religious traditions, which you will learn about tonight, and some of them date back thousands of years. So even though the term was created in the 17th century, it goes much further. And if you look at the poster in the back, colorful poster, you will see the many variants of the Golden Rule in about a dozen or more traditions. And in sum, the Golden Rule is probably our most consistent, universal ethical principle intended to foster equality of treatment. So that's the essence. This rule, I would say, intends to address the issue of individual egocentrism and by extension, group ethnocentrism religiocentrism and all sorts of centrisms. The attempt is to go from I am better than you to equal. So that's the essence of the ethic of reciprocity. Good, I said it twice. And as the title suggests, it's a little subtle, the Golden Rule and Beyond. I'll take you on I'll give you a tidbit of what beyond might mean. Some ethicists have actually criticized the Golden Rule as having a fundamental shortcoming. I'll read one version of the Golden Rule. One should treat others as one would like to be treated. However, in our very diverse world, assuming that others want to be treated like I want to be treated presupposes my value system and preferences on them. But even ignoring cultural diversity, individual diversity, what my likes and preferences are different than most everybody else's preferences. That's one reason we often get in trouble. We attribute other people to kind of thinking the way we do, and by now we should know that that's not the case. And I guess in some, ethics is difficult to articulate and is even more difficult to act upon, so it's a challenge. But how do we correct this particular shortcoming? First, carefully consider the implications of your decisions, words, and actions on others. Focus on treating others with equal respect, not assuming equal, but equal respect. And this may be more of an issue of attitude than it is of behavior. And if we draw a little on Buddhist philosophy, if you have right attitude, is more apt to lead to right behavior. And then I'll share one nugget that I learned at another Monmouth Center event. We learn by doing this. This was a quote from a Sufi Islam practitioner. She said, "Hold yourself to a higher standard than you do others." Say in another way, be strict about your own behavior and cut other people a lot of slack, okay? And I guess I kind of call that the platinum rule. So again, this is egocentrism, this is the golden rule, this is the platinum rule where you basically put others above you. If you treat others with that kind of respect, I think we would have much less conflict in the world. So that's kind of the beyond the golden rule. So we will now hear from our panelists, and you will have a chance to join the dialogue after the panelists have all had a chance to present their story. There are index cards, which some of you may have. If not, raise your hand and somebody will give you one. If you come up with a question as you hear, feel free to write it down. You can hand it in, or you can just hold it for later so you don't forget. And please decide who you would like to ask the question to. There are too many people, too many panelists for every panelist to answer any question, or I might have to choose. Okay, so that's my little story. Now, we will start with going from my right, your left, to my left. And why did we pick this order? I started with the least familiar tradition to the most familiar tradition to, I would assume, this audience. So we will start with the religion of Sikhism, Sikhism, which it's even possible that some of you may not have even heard of this religion. Therefore, it's first while you're all fresh and you can absorb new material. So Dr. Sarbmeet Kanwal also will be seen around Brookdale, not so much as a student, but as a teacher. He's an adjunct professor of astronomy and quantum physics. He also teaches similar classes as part of Brookdale's lifelong learning program. And before his role as a teacher, he enjoyed a distinguished career at AT&T Bell Laboratories and Lucent. Sarbmeet is a fellow board member of the Monmouth Center for World Religions and Ethical Thought. Another mouthful. And I have it up there, MCWRET. If you just Google MCWRET or pick up a brochure in the back, you'll be sure to remember that acronym. And he is also the co-founder of a local interfaith program for high school students known as Mosaic, mobilizing our students for action to build interfaith community. And last June, Dr. Conwall was presented with the Earl Teasley, the late Earl Teasley Award. Earl Teasley was a Brookdale professor. The Earl Teasley Humanitarian Award from the Monmouth County Human Relations Commission. Sarvi, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. And welcome everybody to our panel discussion today. I hope that you enjoy it and that you learn something from it as well. Since Sikhism is, as Joe said, the least known religion perhaps, I felt I should start out with a little bit of an introduction to tell people what it's about. So the Sikh religion started out as a simple idea. Some 500 years ago in the province of Punjab, which is the northwestern part of the Indian subcontinent today. This idea came to a young man by the name of Nanak. He was deeply moved by the horrific conflict between the two great religions, or the two great religious groups, I should say, of his time and his place. And those were the Hindus and the Muslims. He meditated and reflected for a long period of time, and he was able to realize what perhaps many others were not able to see. One of the first quotes that's attributed to Nanak goes as, "I do not see a Hindu, nor do I see a Muslim. I see only a man. So, whose path shall I follow? I shall follow the path shown to me by God, who is neither a Hindu nor a Muslim." So, the foundation, the foundational pillar of the Sikh religion is based on the concept of human equality. And to me, the golden rule essentially means equality of all mankind. Because I feel that if we hold people truly as our equals, then we would certainly not want to do anything to them that we wouldn't want them to do to us, right? So equality to me is what it really boils down to. So just telling you a little bit more about the religion, the word Sikh actually comes from a root word, Sikhna in my language, which essentially means to learn. And the first people that followed Nanak's teachings were called students because they were the learners. And that is how the religion got its name. So we all consider ourselves to be students of life, all our lives basically. Now, Guru Nanak started out by pointing out that all the religions were really the same thing. They were a path to the same one God. There are several quotes that I'd like to share with you that point to this fundamental aspect of the Sikh religion. So one quote goes, in my language it says, "Sarab dharam mein shresht dharam, har ko naam jap nirmal karam." It means the best religion of all religions is the one which helps you meditate on the name of God and which helps you to do kind deeds. Here is another, a little bit longer quote, but basically rooted in the same idea. And this is part of my religion's holy book. It says, some call him Ram. Ram is the name that we give to, Hindus give to their god. Some call him Ram and others call him Khuda. Some serve him as Gusaya and others serve him as Allah. Some pilgrims bathe at sacred shrines, others go on Hajj to Mecca. Some do devotional worship while others bow their heads in prayer. Some read the Vedas and some the Quran. Some wear blue robes and some wear white. Some call themselves Muslim and some call themselves Hindu. Some yearn for paradise and others long for heaven. Says Nanak, one who realizes God's will is the only one that has found the true secret to salvation. So religious equality was clearly the foundational principle of the religion, but there were many other areas in society at that time which needed to also be brought in terms of human equality, and I will give you examples of some of those. One area is class inequality. So even in our society today, there is an elite class which gets special treatment, and then there is, the working class. That was certainly true at that time as well. Guru Nanak, that's how we address the founder of our religion, tried to do many things to get away from the elitism that was present at his time. One of the things that he did was to institute the idea of wearing a turban. Now, let me tell you a little bit about what the turban means in the Indian cultural context. So in India, during those times, it's not so much today, the only people that really were allowed to wear a turban were kings and possibly high-level clerics. That was it. Nobody else got, it was the symbol of being of a very high class. Our religion, or the teachers in our religion, said that we want every single person to wear a turban because all of you are kings. There is no inferiority, there is no superiority. As a matter of fact, each man in my religion has the name Singh in it, which means lion or king, and each woman has the name Kaur in it, which means princess. So it was all intended to make people feel that they were just as good as anybody else. Another kind of inequality, which again we are very much aware of today, is the equality of wealth and poverty. And one of the things that was instituted in the religion was the concept of a common free meal that was served after the services on Sundays in the church of our religion, which is called a Gurdwara. And the way that it made everybody come down to the same level is that that meal was served to all the people who had to sit down in a line, and there was no difference in terms of where you come from, how rich you were, how poor you were. Everybody sat in the same line. They were served the same food from the same people, and they ate that food next to whoever happened to be sitting next to you. I know that when I was growing up in India, I used to go for this meal pretty much every week, and it was not uncommon for me to be sitting with homeless people on both sides. And if there is anything more humbling, it's, when you sit down at the same level with those people, you share the food with them, and you share conversation with them, it really brings you down to a certain level. So that's about wealth. Another thing that the religion was very careful about is to not create a hierarchy within the religion. A lot of our religions have clergy hierarchies, and certain people are allowed to do certain things and others are not. In the Sikh religion, there is no such thing. There is a concept of a service, but every congregant is allowed and able to perform the same service. As a matter of fact, you don't even have to be in a Gurdwara to perform the service. You perform the same service that is performed at the Gurdwaras, you perform that at your home as well. And it is a service that's a little bit similar to the Catholic communion, because we say a prayer, we prepare a communion food, which is made up of flour and sweets, and then we serve that after the prayer is said. Anybody is allowed to serve that food. As a matter of fact, in my home, my mother was the one that was most well-versed, and she would be the one that would serve the communion within the house, or if it happened, even in a church as well. So there is absolutely no hierarchy. The people who work at the Gurdwara are considered to be employees of the Gurdwara, and the Gurdwara is run by the congregants themselves, who form a committee, and these are just people, like myself, who do it. So that's about the clerical hierarchy. Then let me talk a little bit about the concept of racial equality. That's another thing that is very important in our current times. So in India at that time, and to some degree even today, race was equivalent to caste. There were many different castes in India, and each caste was a hierarchical thing, and to the extent that the lowest castes were people that were not even to be allowed to be in the same room as the ones with the higher caste, or to even touch them in some sense. Given the importance of equality, the Sikh religion basically completely did away with the caste system. And one of the ways that they did away with that, by the way, one way that you can always tell the caste, well, you may not be, but I can, tell the caste is by knowing a person's last name, because the last name essentially reveals what caste you come from. In the Sikh religion, the people who joined the religion were asked to get rid of their last name and never use it again. As a matter of fact, all the people were essentially told to use the same last name, which is Singh, which means lion, and all the women were supposed to have a last name, princess. But now in the last quarter century or so, that became a little difficult, because if you have, 20 million people all with the same last name, it creates a little bit of a problem when you need to get registered for schools or colleges and so on. So people have actually started adopting some of the last names if they knew what their last names really were. But many people are just picking their own name. In fact, my last name, which is Canwell, is not a caste name. My father used to write poetry, and he used to use Canwell as his pen name. And he said, well, I have to have a last name because I can't be a Singh, another one of the 1,000 Singhs. So he chose his pen name, Canwell, as his last name, and that's what my last name is. It has no further heritage beyond my father at all. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit about gender equality. Gender equality was extremely important. It is today as well. One of the ways that the religion tried to do away with gender equality was to make sure that your name is not an indication of your gender. One of the things that you may notice if you think about it very carefully is that female names are often have a connotation. They're kind of coy, beautiful, maybe, trying to indicate those sorts of things, while male names are, sort of trying to indicate gruffness or whatever it is. So in my religion, there are no male and female names. Any name can be adopted by any person. In fact, I know many women who have my first name, Sarvmeet. I know many men who have my wife's first name, Virendra. So one of the ways that they wanted to do this, and there were many other ways too. I mean, for example, women are allowed to do all the services that men are allowed to do, even the communion service, absolutely no distinction. And women were treated really well. Culture comes in and things happen, so I can't say that there aren't violations of that, but at least there was an attempt to do that. So those are a lot of the examples that I wanted to give about how important equality is in my religion and how it was brought about, as the religion was founded. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sergeant. So we will now shift our focus to our speaker on Hinduism, Uma Swaminathan. Uma is a cultural anthropologist, author, and retired educator. She taught social studies in the New Jersey public school system. She is an author of a book, Herbal Transformations, that is available on Amazon, Herbal Transformations. Good book, I have it. And Healing with Herbs, which is a bestseller in India. She is the CEO of Dancing Natural LLC, DANSING, and she is a past board member and is now an advisor to the Mama Center for World Religions and Ethical Thought. Uma, please.
Thank you, Joe. And thank you all for being here and giving me this opportunity to talk about Hinduism and the golden rule of the Hindu people. Now, in order to understand the golden rule in Hinduism, one must understand the key principles of Hinduism. So many ancient texts of India deal with the concept of understanding the other through understanding of your own self, through self-realization and what we call as the Brahman. Academic researchers, archaeologists, and anthropologists say Hinduism may be the oldest living major religion in the world, even though Joe didn't think it was a major religion.
Did I say that?
And
Second
minor,
in order.
second, you know.
Oh, no.
Maybe she should be at the other end.
But it was not founded with a religious perspective. It is not a religion of prophecy or prophets. Some may argue whether it is a religion at all. If we compare it to our modern understanding of religion, it seems more like a collection of various spiritual practices. But what is obvious is that Hinduism is polytheistic religion. And that's what everyone thinks, right? I do think so too. We believe in many gods. We pray to many gods. But what you call as God, we call the Brahman. And what you call as angels, we call them as gods. In the introduction to Professor Ishwaran's translation to the Upanishads, and Upanishads are the ancient text from India, Michael Nagler states, and I quote, "The people worship natural forces and the elemental powers of the like the sun, the wind, storm and rain, dawn and night, earth and heaven, fire and offerings. These powers are the devas, gods and goddesses. The devas must once have been a pantheon of separate deities, but it seems clear, even in the earliest hymns, that one supreme being is being worshipped in different aspects. Truth is one hymn proclaims, though the wise call it by many names." End of quote. So in Hinduism, we embrace all religions, all the religions of the world. Hinduism is so fluid that one can belong to any tradition. You see, it's all about the consciousness, being aware, being knowledgeable, and opening your mind to possibilities beyond this realm. So in a sense, there is no such thing as being a Hindu or a non-Hindu. We think of humanity as a whole. So there is no question about whether this culture stands up for the other, because there is no outsider outside of the Hindu. We don't even call ourselves Hindus or our religion as Hinduism. Now that's a shock to you, right? These are names that were given to us. The British in Great Britain don't call their religion Britishism, do they? And the Americans don't call the many religious beliefs here Americanism. And so originally, the Mughals called everyone in the south of Indus River Hindus, from Indus, Hindus, right? Hindus. And their land as Hindustan. That's, the Mughal gave us the name Hindustan. In the few centuries preceding the 20th century, term Hindu was used for all people who lived in the land of Hinduism. Nowadays, the term Hindu designates a person who follows a religion that has been termed by Western scholars as Hinduism. Now, coming back to the Brahman, in the beginning I said, we believe in the Brahman. The Brahman is beyond any limited human personality. It is beyond any human consciousness or any human consciousness can comprehend. You see, it does not get angry, it does not play favorites, and so on, since it has no human attributes or personality. It is beyond anything we can visualize in this three-dimensional world. We can only connect with it through a medium which the ancient texts call as the Ishwar. Everyone has their own personal Ishwar or deity. It could be Krishna, it could be Shiva, it could be Vishnu, it could be Jesus or Mary or Jehovah, or anything we can give a visualization or personality to. It does not matter who your Ishwar is. This is an ancient practice that has existed more than 5,000 years and is spoken of in ancient Rig Veda. That's also an ancient text from India. And that is why we have so many stories where we make the protagonist into an incarnation of God. And that's where the many gods come from. So that you can worship God through that incarnation. The most important rule in Hinduism is ahimsa, the word ahimsa. This is the golden rule of the Hindu people. It includes words, deeds, and thought. Ahimsa means non-harm. It means not only showing no harm to any living creature, but to not think harm as well. It has nothing to do with going to heaven. It has nothing to do with the reward. There is absolutely no selfish reason for one to cause harm. Simply that when one causes or thinks harm, one is putting a veil between oneself and his Atman or soul. And this Atman or soul is a reflection of the great soul of the Brahman. A compassionate heart is a clear soul. This is the fundamental purpose of all yoga and meditation. It is with a clear soul that one can realize the Brahman. In that clarity, one also realizes that all are one life and not separate creatures. Even the thought can create a reaction. It is a multidimensional concept based on the premise that all living beings have the spark of the divine spiritual energy. Therefore, to hurt another is to hurt oneself. In Yajurveda, another ancient text from India, dated between 1000 BC and 600 BC, a section devoted to ahimsa states, "May all living beings look at me with a friendly eye. May I do likewise, and may we look at each other with the eye of a friend." Now, I just told you that ahimsa is the only rule. But within that rule is a doctrine developed in Vedic Brahmanical culture, a central concept in the Chandopadhyaya Veda, Upanishad, that ahimsa should be upheld, holding truthfulness, sincerity, through penance and meditation, compassion, forgiveness, welcoming friendship, and giving charity. The Hindu scriptures reveal to us further, one must value and adhere to humility, forbearance, which is self-control, restraint, and tolerance, righteousness, cleanliness, and purity of the body, internal and external, and purity of the environment. Reading ego. Ego is a very big concept in Hinduism. They say, you get rid of that, you're in peace. All of this is important to understand because this leads to why or how to treat the other. As I quote from one of our great Hindu epics, Mahabharata, and if you have questions about that, you can ask me later. This is the sum of duty. Do not unto others what you would not have them do unto you. And here's a quote from Ordinance of Manu. Wound not others. Do no one injury by thought or deed. Utter no word to pain thy fellow creature. One should not behave towards others in a way which is disagreeable to oneself. This is the essence of morality. All other activities are due to selfish desire and ignorance. So, in Hinduism, the golden rule is, this is the sum of duty. Do not unto others what you would not have them do unto you. And this is also quoted in Mahabharata. So, and finally, a quote from Mahatma Gandhi. If I were asked to define the Hindu creed, I should simply say, search after truth through non-violent means. A man may not believe in God and still call himself a Hindu. Hinduism is a relentless pursuit after truth. Hinduism is a religion of truth. Truth is God. Denial of God we have known. Denial of truth we have not known. Thank you.
Thank you, Uma. I am sure people have learned some things. I know I have learned some things. So we'll now turn our attention to Islam, and we will hear from Fatima Jafari. Fatima was born and raised in New Jersey, daughter of Indian Muslim immigrants. She has a BA degree in history and Middle Eastern studies from Rutgers. She founded the Kuman Learning Center in Howell, New Jersey, and she provides academic coaching. She represents the Muslim community on the Monmouth County Human Relations Commission and the Freehold Clergy Association. She is an educator at her mosque in Freehold and has been organizing interfaith and cross-cultural programs since 2001. I'll ad-lib, I don't know if Fatima remembers, but about 2006, 2007, I took a course in Middle East history here at Brookdale, and Fatima was a guest lecturer and gave an amazing presentation on the head covering in Islam, and I was blown away, and I was a student of Islam at the time, and we have been fast friends and partners ever since.
Thank you.
She is a co-founder of the award-winning Interfaith Youth Leadership Program with Sarbmeet of Mosaic, which in 2016 received the 2016 New Jersey Human Relations, this is the New Jersey, the State Human Relations Council's Unity Award. And she lives with her husband and has 4 children, a couple of teenagers and a couple of infants, and she still finds time to do this good work. Fatima.
Thank you. I begin in the name of God, the most compassionate, most merciful. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I'm beginning with the most often repeated verse in the Quran, which is, in God's name, most compassionate, most merciful. And this is repeated 114 times for the 114 chapters of the Quran. This is also the most repeated verse of the Quran that every Muslim repeats during their day. because we are supposed to, as Muslims, have the most important essential divine quality within ourselves that we're supposed to manifest is compassion and mercy, as God is most compassionate, most merciful. I would like to say I'm very thankful and honored to be here, to be speaking here on this panel. And thank you, Joe, for the invitation, and Janice, and to my friends. I know most of everybody here, which was a plus for me. I've worked with most of the panel members here on various different projects, and most recently what we've been working on is the Garden State Mosaic, which is something that I'm very passionate about, as well as Sarmeet and Oma and Joe, who's our advisor, and Pastor Porter, who has been supporting us. One of the most important things I will be speaking from my experience is that what draws me to doing interfaith work, what draws me to coming together, is that inherent desire that as a Muslim, as a person who follows the faith of Islam, I am here to be submitting myself in peace to God. In order to be a good Muslim, submitting to God, and Islam means the submission to God's will, and comes from the Arabic root word for peace, salam. And a Muslim means the one who follows Islam. I need to bring peace within myself, within my close family members, my friends, my neighbors, my community, my society at large, the country in which I live in, and the world that I live in. So I would like to go back to where Joe was saying, the platinum rule. It's not just something that he heard from a speaker who happened to be a Muslim. It actually has its basis in the Quran, in chapter 41, verse 34. And the Quran is the holy book of the Muslims that we believe that was revealed to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and peace be upon all the messengers of God. Quote, "And good and evil are not alike. Repel that which is evil with what is best. When lo, he between whom and you there was enmity would be as if he were a warm, compassionate friend." So when we have someone saying something negative to us, something which is harmful or hurtful to us, we're not supposed to respond in hurting them back. Instead, do that which is better. And for that, I would like to give an example from the life of the Prophet Muhammad. As he was talking about the message of Islam, submitting to one God, there was a lot of opposition. And there was one particular woman who did not like him at all. And what she would do every day on a daily basis, she would throw garbage at him. And we're not talking about just any kind of garbage, the entrails of animals on him as he passed. So he'd be covered in all this. And this happened for quite some time, every day as he would walk past, and she would do that. And so one day, that woman was not there to throw the filth and the garbage at him. So he became concerned. Is she okay? Now this person was throwing garbage at him every day. Is she okay? Is she not well? Is she alive? So he goes to her home and he knocks on the door. And when she finds out that it is Muhammad who has come to her door, she kind of gets worried and afraid. She goes, "Oh no, you have come to take revenge." And he says, "No, I have not come to take revenge. I have come to find out how you are doing because you didn't throw garbage on me today." She said, "Well, I have not been well." And he said, and then at that point, she realized her mistake. And she said to him, you truly are a messenger of God, a man of God. And she accepts to follow his faith. So it is what we are taught, even as many times as people will throw garbage at you. You must respond with kindness. You must repel evil with good. And that is the command that we are getting from God through our examples that we are learning. Similarly, I just wanted to go back to, in the Quran, we say God has created mankind. And God says, O mankind, and this is in chapter 49, verse 13. Surely we have created you, a male and a female, and made you of different nations and tribes that you may know each other. Surely the most honorable of you with God is the one who is most careful of his duty towards God. Surely God is knowing and aware. So God has created all different types of human beings. If he wanted, we would all be looking the same, but that would be quite boring. So we're created for a purpose to be different colors, different shades, different nations, different languages, different ways of living. But the best in the sight of God is the one who is mindful of God's presence and is humble, who is taking care of their neighbors, their community members, and because we believe that God is watching at all times. Now, what does Islam say about God? And I will go back to the Quran in that, because as Muslims, we believe in one God, and the Arabic word for God is Allah. Now, a lot of times, people try to say, okay, Muslims you believe in a God called Allah. I'm like, well, that's just one God. When we say one nation under God, when I talk to any of our panel members here from all different faiths, we all believe in this concept of this one God. So the way in the Quran God describes himself, and I'm just saying himself, it's not, God is not, we don't believe God has a gender. God is not able for us to comprehend. Say, in the name of God, most compassionate, most merciful, say, Qul huwa Allahu ahad. Say God is one. Allahu samad. God is the one who is not dependent on anyone. Lam yalid wa lam yulad. He begets not, nor is he begotten. He's not like humans. Walam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. And none is like him. So there's nothing that we can compare to God. Even as much as we try to understand and try to bring it into human terms, we believe that there's nothing that we can compare to God. And the purpose of our creation is to serve God, to get closer to God by having those divine qualities. And the first fundamental divine qualities that we need to embody within ourselves is Rahman and Rahim, merciful, being compassionate. And when we look at the word Rahman, Rahim, they come from the Arabic. Everything in Arabic language has a root, as it is in other languages as well. So there's a correlation between the word for Rahman and the compassion or mercy that a child feels when they're surrounded and taken care of within the mother's womb. So even when God compares his, and I'm using, like I said, when God compares himself in his love, he says, I have the love of 70 mothers. So it's about his compassion, his mercy. Also, we are supposed to, as Muslims, repelling evil with good and forgiving, being merciful. We have a saying that give a person 70 excuses before you judge them. 70 excuses. We don't even give one. We make assumptions. Oh, they must have done that because of this. They're, so, well, what was going on? Were they having a bad day? Or in my case, did my toddler have a meltdown right before I came? Because she didn't want to wear her pink shoes. She wanted to wear her snow boots. So anyway, so give the excuses, 70 excuses. And another thing is, before we judge anyone else, every night, this is one of the things that we must do, is to have a daily accounting of our own deeds, of what we have done, every night. If we do not do that, then we are really not being a good believer, a Muslim. We are supposed to be accounting ourselves first before we point fingers at others. How did I make myself a better person today? How did I contribute positively to the world around me, to the people that I love? Was I kind? Especially the hardest thing is, it's not just ourselves that we can be harsh on, but really our closest family members. Our family members are probably the best judge of who we really are. So, I have, my kids, and I really have to struggle with this. It's about how am I interacting? How, when we say in the Golden Rule in Islam, not one of you truly believes until you wish for others what you wish for yourself. How am I treating my children, my spouse, my siblings, my parents, my neighbors? I have a lot to learn. I have a lot to work on. And I have to work on myself first. There's a lot I can cover, but I'm going to be short, and I'm going to wrap up by saying that when we come into a gathering with, as when we dispel from a gathering, there's one surah or a chapter from the Quran that we recite, and it's entitled The Time. And I will read it to you actually in the Arabic. We say, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful. Wal asr, innal insana lafi khusr, illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihat, wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. I swear by time that surely mankind is in loss, except for those who have faith, and those who do good, and those who enjoin each other towards truth, and enjoin each other in patience. So one of the important things is, as time, our short time, 80, 90, 100, whatever years we have in this human existence on this planet that we are at, time is going, and that we are supposed to try to have faith and compassion and try to do as much good as possible, trying to encourage and join patience in times of difficulties, and to seek out the truth. So with that, I guess I'm going to conclude, and thank you very much.
We'll now provide a perspective from Judaism. Rabbi Mallinger is rabbi of Temple Shalom in Aberdeen. He is a member of the multi-faith clergy Bayshore Ministerium. His congregation has supported many good causes, including the Matawan, Aberdeen, and Keyport food pantries, the Bayshore Backpack Buddies feeding 30 or more children every week and on school breaks. He is a leader of Mazon, M-A-Z-O-N, a Jewish response to hunger, and he has participated in many interfaith events, including one or two with me in the past, with another interfaith organization not represented today, Peace Islands Institute, which was once known as the Interfaith Dialogue Center. So, Rabbi Mallinger, please.
Thank you very much. So I thought I would do a different path, and I'm just smiling because of all the similarities that we all have here on this panel, especially as an Arabic and Hebrew speaker, both coming from a Semitic background. Rahman is compassion, and Chesed. Rahman is understanding and mercy, and Chesed is compassion. So a lot of the same language. So back in February, you all gathered with family and friends around televisions or in bars, and you chose sides between the Patriots and the Falcons. And I'm sure it's a very deeply religious moment. So people chose sides trying to figure out which team would win. I played football in high school and a little bit in college, and I'll never forget the realization in high school when both teams were asked to take a knee. And having grown up in South Texas, it's obvious Judaism is not up there at the majority. But everybody would praise in Jesus' name. And I said, so which side is Jesus picking? So it makes you think about and appreciate the diversity, but yet the similarity. Unfortunately, for some of us, this past week's been quite challenging, especially in the state of Arkansas, when they're trying to rush to impose the death penalty on some people who did very heinous crimes. I do not dismiss their behavior, but I'm not convinced that the death penalty is what is acceptable as we interpret it. And yes, I know what the text says, and we'll get there in just a moment. And then, of course, today, the horrific activities that went on in Paris. A policeman was murdered, and it was a terrorist attack, and unfortunately, ISIS took claim for this heinous act. Everybody wants to say they're following the golden rule. But one of the challenges is, whose golden rule are you following? Many years ago, there were court cases in Alabama. They wanted to put a copy or erect a stone structure of the Ten Commandments in the courthouse, on the courthouse steps. One of the problems we always have is, whose version are you going to put there? Because the Jewish version and the Protestant version and the Catholic version are not exactly the same. The words are, but the order is slightly different. And with all due respect, if you're in the courthouse, the Ten Commandments are a little late. So again, I find myself asking questions. So really quickly, my ecumenical background. I have a Bachelor of Science in Applied Mathematics and a minor in Chemistry from Southern Methodist University in Dallas. I have credits toward a Master in Education and School Psychology from Trinity University in San Antonio, Episcopalian School. And then I went to the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion, a Jewish school, where I became ordained rabbi in 1993. The point is, I've always lived in an interfaith or an interreligious community, and I appreciate the diversity and yet the many, many similarities. Rabbis' jobs are to learn our tradition, to read the sacred text, and then find a way to make the text speak to us in the world which we live in. And yes, you're going to get a diversity of opinion and application depending on which branch of Judaism you ascribe to today, from the more traditional of Orthodoxy to the level of Reform that I represent. Our basic text is called the Torah, the 5 books of Moses from Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, and the rest of what some will call, as I will call it, Hebrew Scripture. Christianity will call it the Old Testament. The reason we don't say the word Old Testament because Testament means covenant, and that would imply that our covenant is no longer valid. My running dialogue with my colleagues of ministers and pastors is, if and when Jesus comes, I only have one question. Is it your first time or second time? If it's his first time, I'm like, yes. If it's his second time, oh, crap. But that's my point. The point is, our understanding of the Golden Rule does not come from the sacred text itself. It comes much later from rabbinic literature. So our tradition is based on the written text, which is the Bible, and the oral tradition with that which has shared over time. And so we learn in the Talmud, which is a compendium of the oral law and the rabbinic commentary around it. Fascinating story. 2 idiots, drunks, decide they're going to have a bet. And they have the reputation of knowing that Hillel, the great sage, is very patient. Unlike the other sage, Shammai, who's always short-tempered. And so they make a bet of $400 that the one will get Hillel angry. Fine. They wait till a Friday, because the tradition is on a Friday afternoon for about 2 or 3 hours, Hillel would bathe and get himself comfortable, get him ready to celebrate the Jewish Sabbath. And he knocks on the door. Hillel gets out of the shower, bath, whatever, wraps himself. He goes, I only have one question. Sure, my son, anything you'd like to know? Why do Babylonians have big heads? Now, Hillel is a Babylonian, so all right, fine. So, well, our midwives are not really that good. So we have misshapen heads. Okay? The guy leaves, comes back an hour later, knocks on the door. Hillel puts the towel back on, comes out. Yes, my son, what can I do for you? I just have a question. Why do people who dwell in the desert have slanted eyes? Well, it's to protect them because of all the sandstorm that they have to walk through. Leaves, comes back another hour. Another question. Why do Africans have large feet? So they can walk on the swamps and get safely to their homes. And then he says, curse upon you, Hillel. Why are you cursing me? Because of you, I lost $400. Hillel says, you know, curse be me. You should only lose $400 and lose another $400 because you're going to bet someone else that I will not stay patient. Basically, being the lesson is, it's not worth getting angry over silliness. Today, I had the lovely pleasure of having a day off, which apparently is a myth. Because it was not a day off. And I had a series of texts because something political was going on in my community. I responded to 2 of the 42 texts. That was it. The reason is, some people need to vent. Let them vent. You don't need to respond to everything. And that is what the rule is about. Because after this piece, the text changes really quick and has the person who said wants to convert to Judaism, goes to Shammai and says, I want to only learn the written Torah, not the oral Torah. Convert me. Shammai basically chases away, goes to Hillel. Hillel says, fine, I'll convert you. Today I'm going to teach you the alphabet. Aleph, Bet, Dalet, Gimel. Or Gimel, Dalet, excuse me, wrong order. And he returns the next day and says, today the order is Dalet, Gimel, Bet, Aleph. I said, wait, I don't understand. Yesterday you taught me one way. He said, aha, that's why you need the oral tradition to understand what the written tradition is trying to tell you. Fine. Another one goes, basically says, I want you to teach me the entire Torah while I stand on one foot. Shammai has a stick and basically keeps him away. Goes to Hillel, and this is where we get the great statement. And the statement is, as quote, which is hateful to you, do not go and do to another. That is the entire Torah. That is our tradition. And the rest is his interpretation. Now go and study. So this is the opposite which we're going to learn from Christianity. Meaning, it's the same rule, but making a positive versus a negative statement. And I think part of that, it makes sense to me, when you study the writings of Mark, Matthew, and Luke, and the teaching of Jesus, Jesus is about love. It makes total sense to me. In our tradition, it's not a matter of knowing if you're going to follow all 613 commandments, which are listed in the 5 books of the Torah. And people always ask what's the most important one. They all are. Number 1 is really simple. Be fruitful and multiply. It's that simple. Oh, in marriage. I got to be clear about that one. And the last one, number 613, is to make yourself a copy of these rules so you don't forget. That's really what it is. And then there's 611 in between. And by the way, you can violate 610 of them to save a life. The 3 you can never violate. You cannot murder another to save a life. Now, what that means, you can, of course, have self-defense, by all means. But if someone says, I will let you live if you kill someone else, you either have to kill them, but you cannot take another life to save your own. The second one is you cannot commit an act of idolatry. That's a very strange concept in today's world. Some would say, when you take that green thing out of your wallet and it says, in God we trust, people may worship the money versus the values around it. But again, you cannot commit an act of idolatry. And the last one, you cannot commit an act of sexual depravity, meaning adultery and or incest, to save a life. The point is, living is the highest value. So I was laughing as Joe was reading out. You didn't notice the trend. We feed, we feed, we feed, we take care of the hungry, and we feed again. I have a rule in my congregation. We get people who come to our doors always asking for help. And unfortunately, in today's world, you don't know who needs help and who is trying to take advantage of you. In our tradition, it's called a schnorrer, someone who's begging, if you will. No one leaves my place hungry. I always find money for food. Because, why? I mean, that's what we're supposed to do. Well, food, the word is mazon, by the way, means to sustain life. So if the golden rule is, do not do something hateful to another, well, we never want to starve someone. So find a way to feed them. We just celebrated the feast or festival of Pesach, and the very first thing we say when we sit down at the Seder table is, let all who desire to be free come and join us. All who are hungry, come and join us. So the idea is that we're always trying to help the other. The only other thing I want to say, because I know it's late into the hour, is we have a prayer that we do at the end of every service, which has been modified slightly. May the one who makes peace in the high places grant peace unto all of Israel and all of humanity. The idea is that peace does not just only mean to put your fingers together and go and sing some great release 1960 songs, but rather it means to bring a sense of wholeness in the brokenness of our lives. So if we're going to do unto others that which is hateful to us, then all we're doing is perpetuating the brokenness. But if we're going to help bring a sense of wholeness, then we bring a sense of healing. Thank you.
Thank you. And our last speaker will be from representing Christianity. And the Pastor Porter was not aware the reason we selected this order was starting with the least familiar tradition to the most familiar tradition, I believe, to this audience, at least most, my assumption, of course. Pastor Porter has been the senior minister of the historic Pilgrim Baptist Church of Red Bank since 2003. His online biography confirms to me that he was the perfect match for this panel. He believes the church should never compromise its message of love for all, A-L-L, all, and that we can achieve more in partnership than we can alone. And in 2012, he was part of a delegation of pastors who traveled to Turkey for Christian and Muslim dialogue. And here's a small subset of some of his local efforts. He's the president of the Board of Trustees for the Red Bank Affordable Housing Corporation. He serves on the board of Love, Inc., and is a member of the Red Bank Clergy Association. He has received many honors for his local service, including the Monmouth County Humanitarian Award. I'm honored to finally make his acquaintance, and I look forward to working with him much in the future. Pastor Porter, please.
Well, it's good to see everyone, and to Joe and to the Brookdale Community College, I'm grateful for the invitation to come and sit and share a little bit about our beliefs in the Christian context. To those panelists that are here with me, I applaud them for being such committed advocates of their religious beliefs, but allowing those beliefs to take action in that which they do in service. I do need to add to our conversation today that each one of the religious beliefs that are represented on the panel and others have a segment of the Golden Rule. Unfortunately, we live in this postmodern society now. I haven't gotten to my notes, so you don't have to start timing me. That many of our beliefs and many of our positions religiously have been hijacked by radicals that represent or believe they represent our faiths and our traditions. And so that's why I applaud what we are doing here today, because we can see the sincerity in the actual beliefs and principles by which faith communities operate. And I hope we take from that, from this gathering today, a greater appreciation that we may be of different faiths and different traditions, but we all have the same purpose, which is allowing humanity to live together as one. And so I'm grateful to be here today. I want to start with a quote by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. He said, "Life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others?" When we talk about the Golden Rule in the Christian context, it's basically the principle of treating others as you wish to be treated. The Golden Rule from an historical context it differs from the law of reciprocity. And the law of reciprocity basically says that I give so that you will give to me in return. So however, Christianity and the Golden Rule is a unilateral moral commitment that says that without we give, we serve without the expectation of receiving anything in return. See, according to the theologian Simon Blackburn, the golden rule can be found in some form in almost every ethical tradition, every culture, and every religion. In Christianity, however, the golden rule has been attributed to Jesus of Nazareth, who used it to summarize the Torah when he said this: "Do to others what you want them to do to you. This is the meaning of the law of Moses and the teachings of the prophets." In other words, the phrase the golden rule can be traced back, as Joe has alluded to the 16th century, and was coined in the context of the Christian community. However, the elements and principles of the golden rule have existed, I believe, since the dawn of time. The principle itself is ingenious because it provides each individual, regardless of status or education, a moral searchlight that reveals how we are to treat one another. In Christianity, we view the idea of the golden rule from a holistic perspective. It can be explained from a perspective of psychology, philosophy, and sociology. Psychologically, we believe it involves a person's empathizing with the needs of someone else. From a philosophical standpoint, we believe it involves a person's perception of their neighbor as I or self. And then sociologically, we believe love your neighbor as yourself applies between individuals and groups, so it makes it holistic. Theologically, however, the idea of the golden rule is exemplified in the biblical parable of the Good Samaritan that we see described in Luke chapter 10 of our Holy Bible. In this particular parable, we see the love and care to a wounded man being extended by a non-religious man after those who have religion or had religion passed the wounded man by and were unconcerned with his well-being. In this parable, Jesus teaches us that the wounded man is actually our neighbor. He doesn't have an identity, he doesn't have a religion, he doesn't have a culture, he's just wounded. And regardless of our religious beliefs, we are to demonstrate love and be concerned with the wounds of everybody. And we are to take action to get the man who is wounded or the woman that is wounded, get them the relief that they need. See, that for Christianity is the golden rule. And this principle for Christianity extends to everybody. It includes those who are generally considered hostile even to believers of Christ, those who do not believe what we believe, those who do not follow our Christ, those who don't like us, and those who are antagonistic to our own beliefs. In Christianity, we are compelled to do for others as we would have them do for us. When there is a need, we meet that need as if it was us ourselves. Christianity believes that Jesus calls us to social engagement. Thus, the golden rule becomes the principle by which we are to function. Our Bible, my Bible, teaches us that Jesus is the prime example of the golden rule. In Christianity, Jesus, the Christ, is the most credible person that has ever walked this earth to show us how to live out the golden rule. Jesus is our model in Christianity, for the golden rule movement in humanity is exemplified by the person that we call Jesus. He always treated others with kindness and compassion, and he emphasized the love of humanity and all the miracles that he performed. As he ministered to a Judeo-Christian context of the time in which he lived, Jesus cured lepers. The Bible teaches us that he cast out demons and he healed those who were paralyzed. He raised the dead. He healed the blind and he healed the mute, and he did many other miracles. And for Christians, Jesus is not only the perfect example, but he is the embodiment of the golden rule. In his teachings, Jesus invites all of us to consider how we want to be treated and then act the way we want to be treated towards others. He invites us to proactively consider serving in a manner that not just benefits ourselves, but benefits all those who are around our sphere of influence. Christianity understands that the golden rule, by embracing we are to not expect anything in return when we offer service to someone else. Now, there is a criticism, however. And the criticism that we must realize is this in this idea of the golden rule. The strongest criticism against the golden rule is simply this. It assumes we understand another person from a different race. It assumes we know another person from a different culture. It assumes we understand the other person's religious beliefs. And it also assumes that we understand how that person wants to be treated. So at the root of the argument is how much are we really alike and how much do we really know about each other? See, this is the great tension of the golden rule. If people are so diametrically different, then our understanding of their particular needs is misaligned. And then the rule has little value in humanity. However, as members of the Church of Jesus Christ, we accept the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of mankind. And we join our collective voices to a larger chorus that in similar ways have common humanity clothed in their religious beliefs. And what this means is no matter what the religion may be, no matter what our issues may be, there is a recognition that conveys nearness and similarity of all of our basic needs and our basic life wants, and our recognition that we are more alike than we are different. Because the golden rule covers our humanity, it also behooves us to recognize not only our similarities, but also embrace the challenge of understanding our differences. And by applying the golden rule to our society, we support the reality of freedom, we support the reality of a respect for human rights, and the importance of social awareness. Christianity believes it is an increasingly connected world in which we live with varying beliefs, varying cultures, varying practices, and the golden rule we believe offers peace and harmony in every situation. Christianity believes the golden rule works with interpersonal teachings of Jesus, providing the guide for all of us to exist. If we are wondering what someone believes or how they want to be treated, if we really want to meet someone else's needs, we first of all have to develop a relationship in order to allow us to ask them. We cannot assume that we understand another person's need if we have no interpersonal relationship with them. When we wonder what a particular group may find offensive, we must do the research to appreciate the cultural norms within the context of that individual's life. See, Christianity challenges us to get to know our neighbors. It challenges us to learn their families. It challenges us to learn their work and to learn their views. If we cultivate a meaningful relationship of mutual trust and understanding with people from different backgrounds and beliefs, then we can begin the process of applying the golden rule. You can't apply the process until you first understand the person. It is to this that we as Christians believe. And finally, the golden rule's application can be linked to what I believe are two of the great commandments of the Bible. Love God and love your neighbor. Christianity believes when the golden rule is lived out, it makes visible in our lives the observance of these two great commandments. Understand the summary principles of the gospel are to love God and to love thy neighbor. The summary guide to their application is what we refer to as the golden rule. While the rule is simple and concise, its real-life application requires a lot of effort on our parts. See, it causes us to look outside of ourselves, keeping us humble and keeping us faithful to our religious beliefs. Anyone who sincerely applies the golden rule helps ensure their acts are consistent with the moral standards of their life. And for Christians who believe in the teachings of Jesus Christ, the golden rule is the means of patterning our lives after the one we accept as our Lord and Savior. Mark Twain said it best when he said this: do something every day that you don't want to do. This is the golden rule for acquiring the habit of doing your duty without pain. This is what Christianity believes about the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Thank you again for the opportunity to serve.
Thank you. Well, hopefully, everyone has learned something. In particular, hopefully, have gotten rid of a misperception, which I think is the place to start, is to unlearn some things. And besides just learning some information, hopefully each of you has been inspired, as I have, from the good messages that we've heard. It is now your turn to participate in the dialogue. If you have any questions on index cards that you want to hand off to Janice, give them to her. You can read them yourself. You don't have to hand them in. So first, a little bit about dialogue. Dialogue is about listening and learning from each other. And in the spirit of the golden and platinum rules, I invite each of you to be respectful of our panelists and of each other. That means please be brief and ask, if you have much on your mind, we'll do them one at a time
Brief.
so that everybody gets a chance, and we'll come back to you. And it is okay to raise a sensitive issue. So we're not trying to, stop you from expressing yourself. But let's try to do it in a non-confrontational manner. Now, how do you do that? I'll give you a tip. Rather than saying something like, religion X teaches blah, 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 try something like this. I heard, I read, I thought that religion X suggests something. By doing that, you will get less of a defensive reaction from the person you address the question to. And I'll also suggest by doing it that way, you are more open to hearing a response because you haven't started out from a position of absolutism. So if we want to learn, we have to be humble about what we think we know. I've been doing this a long time. This works. I'll also suggest that that's a good way just to have interpersonal communication on a day-to-day basis. As you bump into people and something's bothering you, don't jump on them. Just say, I'm a little curious about, and go about it softly and directly, and you may be surprised. You may have a conversation as opposed to an abrupt end of a conversation or something degenerating into a shouting match. We want to try to avoid that. And I can tell you through practice, it works. I've seen it work. And if you do have a question, try to suggest who you would like to address the question to. Since we have a large panel, we may never get past the first question if they all address it. I might have to pick a panelist. Okay, so let's get started. Well, let me see how many questions are out there so I have a sense for pacing things. Or all the questions are flowing towards me. Okay, great. So we have about a half a dozen questions, which is just about right. This question actually came in before the panel started, so that's good. Somebody was really thinking. Do rules and guidelines within different religions give people a sense that their version of morality is the only correct version? And how do different religions truly promote open-mindedness and tolerance of others? I would suggest that the panelists have already addressed that question. So again, some people within some religions may take a narrow perspective, but I would suggest that most people in most religions do not have that narrow perspective. And clearly the folks you heard from today have the broadest possible perspective. The golden rule applies to all, whether you're of the same religion or other. So I'm assuming this question's been answered. Okay.
Joe, if I can just add,
Okay.
the pastor said it so beautifully, and that's one thing I think we need to emphasize, is that we represent our communities. We cannot possibly represent our faith in its entirety. And so always remember that the majority of people of faith truly want to be living the life by the golden rule. And that no matter who you meet in the world, always try to take the upper hand. And so that's what we're trying to do. But I don't want to diminish the reality that we have to deal with, that we all deal with our various communities, that there are people who just see the world a little differently. And we just have to find a way to be open and have the conversation and see that every human being is created in God's divine image.
Here is a simple one for Sarabmeet. Who wrote the Bible of the Sikh religion?
Actually, that's a real good question. Well, first of all, let me tell you what the Bible of the Sikh religion is. It's called the Guru Granth Sahib, which basically means the big book. That's what it is. The big book was contributed to, it was not written by a single person, it was contributed to by as many as 40 or 50 different holy people. The interesting thing, which is consistent with the theme and the purpose of the religion, is that out of those people, almost half of them were Muslim and half of them were from Hindu backgrounds, and some actually even outside both of those groups as well. So it was not written by one person, it was written by, it was a collection, it was, kind of like an edited book is what it is. And we regard the Holy Book as almost having a personality. We have our Holy Book. A lot of us have them in our homes. We always have a special place for it. We always put it to rest in the evening by closing it and covering it up. And every morning we open it by reading a verse. And so we almost treat it as if it was a teacher for us.
Thank you. I'm going to shorten up a question here. So clearly there is conflict and violence in the world. And the attribution to some of this is because of cultural and religious differences. And if all the religions seek peace and to be the bigger or better person, why is there so much war, hatred in global affairs? I feel like religion is at fault. I'll tackle that one for starters. I've been studying conflict, because that's really what I'm all about conflict avoidance. And my study of history, including recent history, is that in general, it's not the religion that has started the war. It is a political move to gain power, to gain land, to gain wealth. And if you're a king and you happen to have a close relationship with your religious bodies, you kind of say, come help me motivate my people. So religion is used by political leaders to fire up people and create difference. It's not the religion itself, it's the manipulation of religion. And this has been going on forever. So when you think people say that religion is the cause of this war, dig a little deeper, you're apt to find that that's not the case. There are some exceptions to that. There have been some examples where the leaders of religion have fomented violence, but in general it's been the other way. I don't know if anybody wants to add to that or...
Can I say something?
Yeah, please.
What I want to say is among the Christianity, there was a time period a long time ago when they came to South America and they converted people. And when the conversion was taking place, it was through violent means at that time. Now, in India, there's big conversion going on throughout India. But then, it's a peaceful conversion. They go and talk about it. They, have more, rapport with the people, and with their permission, with their personal acceptance, people convert to Christianity. But there, it's a question of, how in a nicer way you can do it. And it's being done. So, that to me is positive because, it's a positive thing where, there's no violence involved. It's, through your own personal decision.
If I may, it's important, I don't know where the question came from, and I agree with Joe and my colleague from Hinduism. We must be mindful that there is a radical side to all religions who seek to use religion for their own self-purposes. And in the name of religion, they do X, Y, and Z. And many atrocities have occurred throughout the world in history in the name of religion. The Christian Crusades are a perfect example of that. However, it's dialogues like this that help us to recognize the purity of our beliefs. And it's the purity of our beliefs that are really going to change the tone and tenor of humanity. And it's important that we understand there's a segment of people that don't represent our religions well. They do more harm than good. And so we must understand that. But what I appreciate about this type of discussion is that I can learn to appreciate someone else's tradition and know they represent the purity of the position in religion and tradition rather than what I may read in the newspaper or I know about history. So I wanted to just share that.
Okay, I'd like to answer a few questions. There's a couple of questions that came up about why is Islam different in practice versus what you hear commonly in the headlines, violence, treatment of women, and so on. I'd like to draw your attention to what you see on the media. It's very selective. What I know as a Muslim, a person from the Muslim community, and what you know in general, not really being students of Islam, or is much different because you're going to hear just sound bites, what you hear on the media. In Islam, the Quran says to save life is to save all of humanity. To take one life is as if you have taken all of human life, humankind. Now, that is not just something that we just say in theory, it is something that we are practicing. My father is a physician. He lives in a country that is predominantly Christian. Actually, he practices in a town that has a large Jewish population in Ocean County. And the lives that he has saved as a surgeon, 99% of them were not Muslim. They were human beings. He was practicing his faith, and he would always say, because he has a lot of Jewish patients from the Hasidic community in Lakewood, and Christian patients, he would treat every single one of them as if he is treating his own family members. So much so that his patients, many of them are rabbis, they would come back to him, showing him pictures of their children, grandchildren, because they would see that connection that he was one of those people that saved his life and the importance of life in the Jewish tradition. I remember when I started working on this after 9/11, the priest I met from St. Robert's Co-Cathedral, which is now Co-Cathedral on Freehold, Father Ed, when he heard my name and he says, "Are you related to Dr. Jafari?" And I said, "Yes, he's my father." He says, "Well," back in, I guess, 1980s, he says, when I used to live in Lakewood, I went to your father. And I said, "Yeah, okay." A lot of people say that to me. And he says, "But I remember him very, very well. He was different from all the other doctors." And I said, "What was different?" And he says, "Well, after he took care of him and checked him out and everything, when Father Ed went to make the payment, he says, "Father, there's no need for you to make a payment. All I need from you is a prayer." And I know Father Ed's been said that story many times, but this was something from our faith. He's not trying to put out a show to show off in the media that, okay, Muslims are not like this. It's just his daily interaction. This is what I learned from my father. This is what I learned from my grandparents. My grandparents had lived in England for quite some time. My grandfather was a medical doctor too, an infectious disease specialist, and he used to work in very remote villages in India, but he had done his training in England. And on Sundays, when he was in England, my grandmother would say, and this I learned after I did my first event post 9/11. We were doing a prayer service, and my grandmother was there. And mind you, she was in her mid-80s at that time, and she used to wear. She was a very typical Indian lady, wearing her sari wherever she went. Didn't matter where she was traveling in the world. I don't know if you've ever seen a sari. It's 6 yards of material. It's beautiful, but you can trip over it if you don't know how to put it on right. But she'd be with her sari, and she would go to church on Sunday. And I said, "Why did you go to church, Grandma?" I would call her Dadi. So why did you go there? She goes, "It was a house of God. It's a house of worship. There were no mosques, so we went to church." But they were practicing Muslims. And this does not go against, and I'm talking about praying 5 times a day and all that, does not go against what we say in the Quran. Actually, in the Quran, it tells us, that God tells us, that had there not been God's repelling some people by others, certainly there would have been those who pulled down the cloisters, the churches, the synagogues, and mosques in which God's name is much remembered. So it is a responsibility as a Muslim to protect the places of worship. What happened on Palm Sunday in Egypt with the Coptics, who are one of the oldest Christian groups existing since probably from the time of Jesus, who we believe as Muslims to be a prophet of God. I cannot be Muslim unless I believe in Jesus and Moses and Abraham and 124,000 prophets, only out of which 25 are mentioned in the Quran. They came in many, many different parts of the world. We don't know all of them. So I cannot deny that any of the other religions they're all be believed because of the common thread that they all have a divine essence of the same God. So on Palm Sunday, who were the people defending the churches? There was a story that came out, and I remember reading this article about, it said the Muslim woman, the Egyptian Muslim woman who died defending Christians on Palm Sunday. Brigadier General Nagwa al-Hagar is one of 3 female Muslim police officers who died in the attacks. Is that story mentioned? No. We don't hear it. Because all you hear is about ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Taliban. They do not represent our faith. On 9/11, not only was my country attacked, but my faith was attacked. If it wasn't for 9/11, I wouldn't be here. I'd be just, minding my own business, taking care of my family and whatever. But I'm here as an act of my faith to get closer to God by making peace, by building dialogue, by trying to teach what my faith really means. I'm not apologizing for the people who did. No, I didn't do that. Why do I have to answer for the extremists who are not just killing Christians? Christians and Jews are a minority of what the extremists are doing. Do you know who they kill the most? Did anyone hear about the ISIS suicide bomber who killed over 120 people in Syria who are trying to get out of? How much is that covered? Did anyone hear about, yes, we heard about Paris today, and we condemn all those because that is against our faith. It's against what God wants from us. They are doing everything that our religion tells us not to do, and they're putting a label of religion on it just because of wanting power, political grievances. That's not the way. Does anyone hear about, and the last night of Ramadan last year I'm talking about in July, and I have to mention this, the last night of Ramadan in the holy city of Medina in Saudi Arabia, that is where the Prophet Muhammad's tomb is. Now, ISIS had several attacks during Ramadan at mosques, killing hundreds of people. In Medina, at the Prophet Muhammad's tomb, ISIS has a suicide bomber who comes in to try to attack the tomb of the Prophet Muhammad. Now you tell me, is that Islam? Does anyone, you tell me, it's like saying you're Catholic and you go to the Vatican to bomb the Pope. So when everyone says, oh, ISIS is Islamic, no. No. They're using the label Islam. They're taking quotes and ayats from the Quran out of context in order to further their own political motives, to try to quell their grievances that they may have, taking it out of context. The difference in Islam between the extremists and is how they interpret the text. Anyone can take the Bible out of context, and you can see I've studied, I've been a study of religions since a young age. You can take it out of context to justify causing harm, or you can look at the general universal principles of love and mercy and compassion. Are the verses, are these meant for a specific instance, a historical context, or is it something which is meant for universal purposes? And that's when we're looking at the interpretation of the Quran. ISIS does not interpret the Quran. They do the most ridiculous things. These people don't even know how to read Arabic. And that's one of the things. In order to interpret the Quran, you need to have I cannot interpret the Quran. I'm not a scholar. I have not studied Arabic for 10 years, and especially the Arabic of the time of the classical Arabic. I also have not gone into the in-depth understanding of hadiths, which are the traditions of the Prophet, in terms for me to interpret. I need to go to the scholars who have written the interpretations and then bring it forward. So I will just end with that, and I will say that I hope that answered your question. And again, about treatment of women, they're doing what they're not supposed to be doing. Islam gave women the right to own property, the right to inherit, and the right to have an education. So the question again was, why is Islam so different in practice versus what we see? And that's why out of the 1.7 billion Muslims, our religion has been hijacked by a small, tiny minority. And what you're seeing, these conflicts are really not about religion, it's about politics. And so when I sit together with my friends from different interpretations of Islam, different sects of Islam, we don't sit there and start saying, are we enemies? Or no, we find what we have in common. If you said Islam was spread by violence, I would ask you, why is Indonesia an archipelago with over 10,000 islands? 10,000 islands. How do you take an army over there, an army back 1,000 years ago, and try to convert everybody forcefully? In Islam, in Quran, God says, La ikraha fid din. There's no compulsion in religion. You cannot force anybody to believe in God. And then we say in the Quran, every child learns this in Surah Lakum dinakum waliyad-din. To use your religion, to me, is if we do not agree on how we worship and how we believe, to use your religion, to me, is mine. Thank you very much.
I'd like to add some personal experience. I studied Islam pretty seriously to try to understand that same question. I really couldn't come away with an answer because you can interpret this way or this way. How I came to the conclusion that Islam can be a religion of peace for most is through relationships with Muslims who I knew were pious and were working towards peace. So that was it for me. Much like when I was in the schoolyards of Brooklyn, I grew up as a Catholic, and I had mostly Jewish friends in school. There were some Jewish kids I liked, some I didn't like. I quickly learned the rule that people are people, and it doesn't, first get to know them as people. That's what counts, not their ethnicity or their religion or lack thereof. And give people some slack, which I probably didn't learn that then. I've since learned that.